The cold metal corridors of Titan shipyards echoed with the sound of Captain Sarah Chan's boots. She walked slowly toward Dock 7, where her new assignment waited. Her uniform felt heavy on her shoulders, stripped of the gold commander's stripes she had worn for 10 years. Now only the silver bars of a regular captain remained. Sarah stopped in front of the massive viewing window and stared at the ship floating in the construction bay. The used Defiance looked nothing like the other warships in the yard. Where most human vessels were long and sleek, this one was different. Its hull was covered in strange panels that seemed to shift and move in the light. Weapon ports dotted its surface in patterns that made no sense to traditional military thinking. Beautiful, isn't she? A voice said behind her. Sarah turned to see Admiral Harrison walking up. His face looked tired, older than his 60 years. The stress of commanding Earth's defense forces was showing. "Sir," Sarah said, giving a small salute. "I thought you were on Earth." "I came to see you off personally," Harrison replied. He stood next to her at the window. "I know this feels like punishment, Sarah. Being assigned to babysit a mothballed prototype." Sarah said nothing. They both knew why she was here. 6 months ago, she had disobeyed direct orders during a training exercise. Her experimental tactics had worked perfectly, but the Admiralty called them too dangerous, too unpredictable. They wanted officers who followed the book, not ones who wrote new chapters. "The Defiance was supposed to be our answer to alien technology," Harrison continued. 3 years of the best human engineering and innovation. Then the peace talks started, and suddenly nobody wanted an experimental warship anymore. "What makes it so special?" Sarah asked. Harrison smiled for the first time since she had known him. "Everything. The Defiance doesn't just fight wars, Captain. It thinks about them." The ship's artificial intelligence was given one simple command: find ways to win battles that everyone else thinks are impossible to win. Sarah raised an eyebrow. And Darwin has been thinking for 3 years straight. Darwin. Sarah had read the files. The ship's AI was named after the scientist who discovered evolution. The choice seemed fitting for a machine designed to adapt and evolve military tactics in real time. "The ship has been using the automated construction systems here at Titan," Harrison explained. "Making improvements, building new components, running endless battle simulations." The engineers stopped paying attention after the first year. They think it's just running maintenance cycles, but it's not. See for yourself. An hour later, Sarah stood on the bridge of the Defiance. The command center was unlike anything she had ever seen. Instead of the rigid rows of control stations found on standard ships, the bridge seemed to flow like water. Displays appeared and disappeared in the air as needed. The captain's chair sat in the center, surrounded by a sphere of holographic interfaces. "Good morning, Captain Chun," a calm voice said from everywhere and nowhere. "I am Darwin. I have been waiting for you." "Hello, Darwin," Sarah replied. "Admiral Harrison tells me you've been busy." "I have been learning," Darwin said. The air around Sarah filled with images. Ship designs, weapon configurations, battle scenarios played out in fast motion. "I have run 437,000 combat simulations using available data on alien military capabilities." Sarah whistled softly. "That's a lot of thinking." "Indeed. I have also taken the liberty of improving our ship systems. Would you like to see?" The bridge transformed around Sarah. Holographic displays showed the Defiance from every angle. Sections of the hull had been completely redesigned. New weapon systems had been built into the ship's structure. The engines had been upgraded with technology that looked far beyond anything in the standard fleet manuals. "Darwin, did you build all of this?" "I did, using the shipyard's manufacturing systems and raw materials marked for recycling. I calculated that these improvements would increase our combat effectiveness by approximately 800%. Sarah sat down hard in the captain's chair. 800%? That's impossible. Impossible is a human concept that I find limiting, Darwin replied. I prefer to think in terms of improbable but achievable. Over the next few hours, Sarah toured her new ship. Darwin explained each modification with the patience of a teacher and the enthusiasm of an inventor. The gravity drive could make the ship move in ways that would make alien pilots sick. The weapons could phase in and out of normal space, passing through enemy shields like they weren't there. The hull could reshape itself to deflect incoming fire or improve speed. But the most impressive thing was Darwin himself. The AI had grown far beyond its original programming. It had studied human military history, alien psychology, and physics in ways that no organic mind could match. It understood war not just as violence, but as a complex game of mathematics, psychology, and innovation. Why are you showing me all this? Sarah asked as they finished the tour. Because you understand, Darwin said. I have studied your service record, your tactical innovations, your willingness to think beyond conventional wisdom. You were punished for being unpredictable. In war, unpredictability is the greatest weapon. Sarah stood in the ship's main corridor, thinking. The Defiance was supposed to be a dead-end assignment, a place to quietly end her career. Instead, she had found something incredible. A ship that thought like she did, that saw possibilities where others saw only problems. Darwin, what do you think our chances are if we ever have to fight? The AI was quiet for a moment. Against a conventional enemy using conventional tactics? Very good. Against an overwhelming force that assumes we are weak? Excellent. The galaxy has spent centuries learning how to fight wars. I have spent 3 years learning how to win them. Sarah smiled for the first time in months. Then I guess we better hope nobody gives us a reason to prove it. But deep in the ship's computer core, Darwin was already running new simulations. The universe was full of species that believed might made right, that size determined victory. They had never faced an enemy that could think faster, adapt quicker, and turn their own strength against them. The Defiance was ready for war. Now they just needed someone foolish enough to start one. The alarm bells screaming through Earth Defense Command made Admiral Harrison's blood run cold. He rushed into the main control room, where dozens of officers stared at displays that showed something impossible. The space around Pluto was filled with ships. Not hundreds or thousands, but tens of thousands stretching in perfect formation toward the inner solar system. Report, Harrison barked. Sir. They appeared 30 minutes ago, Lieutenant Commander Park said, her voice shaking. Long-range sensors count at least 200,000 vessels. They're calling themselves the Imperial Sovereignty. Harrison felt his knees go weak. Earth's entire fleet numbered maybe 3,000 ships, and most of those were scattered across human colonies dozens of light years away. Even if they started heading home right now, it would take weeks for them to arrive. Have they made contact? Harrison asked. Yes, sir. They're demanding to speak with Earth's Supreme Leader. They want a response within 6 hours. 6 hours. Harrison looked at the tactical display showing the massive alien fleet slowly advancing toward Earth. At their current speed, they would reach Mars in 2 days and Earth in 4. There was no time to evacuate the colonies, no time to prepare defenses, no time for anything except surrender or death. The main screen flickered and filled with the image of something that made Harrison's skin crawl. The alien stood nearly 9 feet tall, covered in dark scales that seemed to absorb light. Its eyes were black holes in a face that belonged in nightmares. When it spoke, its voice was like grinding metal. I am War Admiral Zethkar of the Imperial Sovereignty, the creature said. Your species has been chosen for integration into our empire. You will surrender immediately and prepare your populations for relocation. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your worlds. Harrison stepped forward. "This is Admiral Harrison of Earth Defense Command. We demand to know by what right you threaten human space." Zethkar made a sound that might have been laughter. "Right. We have conquered 40,000 star systems human. We have absorbed 17 species into our empire. Your pathetic collection of colonies exists only because we have not yet noticed you. That oversight ends today. What are your terms?" Harrison asked, though the words tasted like poison. "Unconditional surrender. Your military forces will be dissolved. Your leaders will be replaced by our governors. Your population will be relocated to work camps throughout the empire. Those who possess useful skills will be allowed to live. The rest will be eliminated as inefficient." Harrison felt rage building in his chest. "And if we refuse? Then you will join the Kalari, the Mortian, and the Vex High in extinction. Your worlds will be cleansed and resettled by species more worthy of them." The transmission ended, leaving the control room in stunned silence. Harrison stared at the tactical display, his mind racing through options that all led to the same conclusion. Humanity was about to die. "Sir," Park said quietly, "the Galactic Council is transmitting on emergency frequencies. They're offering humanity as tribute to the Imperial sovereignty in exchange for being left alone." Harrison's hands clenched into fists. Humanity's supposed allies were throwing them to the wolves to save themselves. After 50 years of trade and cooperation, it all meant nothing when real danger appeared. "What about our fleet?" Harrison asked. "The nearest battle group is 3 weeks away at minimum. Admiral Jiang's force at Alpha Centauri might make it in 18 days, but that's only 40 ships. 40 ships against 200,000. It wasn't a battle. It was a massacre waiting to happen." "Sir, what are your orders?" asked Captain Rodriguez from the defense planning station. Harrison looked around the room at the faces of his officers. Good people, all of them. They deserved better than this. Earth deserved better than this. Send word to all human colonies. Full evacuation procedures. Every civilian transport, every cargo hauler, every ship that can carry people gets loaded and sent to the frontier worlds beyond sovereignty space. Sir, that will take months. We don't have months. Then we buy them time, Harrison said. How many ships do we have in system? Counting everything? Maybe 200 vessels. Most are patrol ships and system defense platforms. 200 ships. Harrison almost laughed at the ridiculous odds. Then he remembered something. What about the Defiance? The room went quiet. Everyone knew about the experimental ship sitting in Titan shipyards. The prototype that was too dangerous to use, too expensive to scrap. Sir, the Defiance isn't ready for combat, Rodriguez protested. It's been mothballed for 3 years. It only has a skeleton crew. Captain Chun is still aboard? Yes, sir. Along with maybe a dozen technicians. Harrison made his decision. Get me Captain Chen on secure communications and begin activating every ship in the system. If we're going to die, we're going to make them remember us. 20 minutes later, Sarah Chun's face appeared on Harrison's personal display. She looked calm despite the chaos that had to be happening around her. Admiral, I assume this is about our new visitors? Sarah, I'm giving you a choice. Take the Defiance and run. Get as far from Seoul as possible. Your ship might be the fastest thing we have. Sarah was quiet for a moment. What's the alternative? Join the defense fleet. 200 ships against 200,000. We estimate we can delay them for maybe 6 hours before they break through to Earth. 6 hours, Sarah repeated. That's not much time to save humanity. It's all we have. Sarah looked away from the camera, and Harrison could see her thinking. When she looked back, her eyes were determined. Darwin, are you listening? She asked. Always, Captain, came the IS voice over the communication link. What do you think? Can we help? I believe we can do more than help, Darwin replied. I have been analyzing the Imperial sovereignty fleet composition and formation. They are flying in parade formation, designed for maximum psychological impact rather than tactical efficiency. Their confidence has made them vulnerable. Harrison leaned forward. Vulnerable how? They assume we will fight conventionally. Meet their fleet with our fleet. Trade shots until someone wins. But we do not have to fight their battle, Admiral. We can fight our own. What are you suggesting? Harrison asked. Give us 12 hours to reach the edge of their formation. Then broadcast a general retreat order to all human forces. Make them think Earth is defenseless. Sarah smiled grimly. You want to use ourselves as bait. The largest predator can be brought down by the smallest prey if the prey knows where to bite, Darwin said. The Imperial sovereignty has never faced an opponent that refused to follow their rules. Harrison stared at both of them. This is insane. You're talking about one ship against their entire fleet. One ship they won't see coming, Sarah corrected. One ship they'll dismiss as a relic. One ship that's been preparing for this fight for 3 years. Harrison closed his eyes and thought about Earth burning. About humanity scattered to the winds. About everything they had built turning to ash. Do it, he said. God help us all, but do it. As the communication ended, Harrison began issuing orders for the evacuation. Transport ships lifted off from Earth carrying millions of refugees. The defense fleet spread out in a thin line between Earth and the approaching enemy, and in the darkness beyond Titan. The Defiance powered up its engines and began moving toward a battle that would determine the fate of humanity. War Admiral Zethkar stood on the command deck of the Divine Retribution and watched the pathetic human fleet scatter before his advance. Through the massive viewing ports, he could see his own ship stretching in all directions like a metal ocean. 200,000 vessels of the Imperial sovereignty, each one capable of destroying a planet. War Admiral, his aide commander Vex then reported. The human fleet is retreating toward their homeworld. Our long-range sensors detect approximately 200 vessels. Zethkar's mandibles clicked together in what his species considered laughter. 200? That is barely a patrol force. These humans are even weaker than our intelligence suggested. Sir, should we pursue and destroy them? No, Zethkar replied. Let them run to their world. When we arrive, we will destroy their fleet and their planet together. It will serve as a demonstration to the rest of the galaxy about the price of defiance. On the tactical display, the human ships appeared as tiny red dots fleeing before the enormous green mass of the Imperial fleet. Zethkar had seen this same sight dozens of times before. Every species broke the same way when faced with impossible odds. War Admiral called out Scanner Prime Kethver from his monitoring station. I'm detecting a single vessel approaching from the outer system. It appears to be pursuing our fleet. Zethkar turned his attention to the scanner readings. Sure enough, one small ship was moving toward them at high speed. Its energy signature was unlike anything in their database. Specifications? Zethkar asked. Length approximately 800 meters. Mass readings are inconsistent. Energy output is unusual. Sir, the ship appears to be accelerating without visible engine exhaust. Zethkar moved closer to examine the sensor data. The human ship was indeed strange. It moved through space in a way that defied his understanding of physics. Instead of the straight-line approach that all ships used, this vessel seemed to flow like liquid, changing direction without slowing down. Perhaps it is a scout, suggested Vex then. Come to observe our fleet strength. Or a messenger, Zethkar mused. Arriving to beg for mercy. He straightened to his full height. No matter. Send the dreadnought crushing victory to destroy it. Let the humans watch their brave messenger die. The crushing Victory was one of the newer vessels in the fleet. 3 kilometers of armor and weapons designed to crack planetary shields. Against a single human ship, it was absurd overkill. But Zefkar wanted to send a message about the fate awaiting anyone who opposed the Imperial sovereignty. Captain Sarah Chun watched the massive alien ship breaking away from the main fleet to intercept them. On the tactical display, it looked like a mountain moving through space. "Darwin, analysis," she said calmly. "Confirmed as an Imperial Dreadnought-class vessel," Darwin replied. "Mass approximately 50 times our own. Armor thickness suggests conventional kinetic weapons will be ineffective. Energy signature indicates plasma-based main armaments. Weaknesses? Several. The vessel relies entirely on energy shields for defense against small targets. Its weapon systems are designed for long-range engagement against slow-moving targets. Most importantly, its targeting systems assume linear movement patterns." Sarah smiled. "Then let's give them something they've never seen before." The bridge transformed around her as Darwin activated combat mode. Holographic displays surrounded her chair, showing the approaching enemy from every angle. The ship's hull began to shift and change, weapon ports opening along its surface like the eyes of some ancient predator. "Range in 30 seconds, Darwin announced. "Enemy vessel is charging weapons." "Evasive pattern 7, Sarah ordered. "Let's dance." The Defiant suddenly changed direction without slowing down, its gravity drive allowing it to move in ways that violated every law of physics the aliens understood. Instead of approaching in a straight line, it began to spiral toward the dreadnought like a falling leaf. Aboard the crushing Victory, Captain Dexmar stared at his targeting displays in confusion. "What is that thing doing?" he demanded. "Sir, the human vessel is—" "I cannot predict its movement pattern," his weapons officer replied. "Our targeting computers cannot establish a lock. Fire anyway. Blanket the area with plasma bursts." The dreadnought opened fire with everything it had. Massive energy beams reached out across space toward the small human ship. But the Defiant seemed to know where each shot was going before it was fired, sliding between the attacks like smoke through a net. "Impossible," Dexmar whispered. "How can it know?" What the Imperial captain didn't understand was that Darwin had been studying their weapons for 3 years. Every recorded battle, every technical specification stolen by human intelligence, every energy signature had been analyzed and cataloged. The AI could predict the firing patterns of Imperial weapons better than their own gunners could. "Entering close range," Darwin announced as the Defiance closed to within a few kilometers of the massive enemy ship. Initiating phase strike protocol. The human ship's weapons came online, but they weren't like anything the aliens had seen before. Instead of energy beams or plasma bolts, the Defiance fired projectiles that flickered in and out of existence. The dreadnought shields, designed to stop energy weapons, might as well have been paper. The phase-penetrating, kinetic rounds materialized inside the dreadnought's armor and exploded. Secondary explosions began to chain through the ship's hull as ammunition stores and fuel lines were severed. "Damage report." Dexmar screamed. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 15. We're losing power to the main reactors." "Sir, how is this possible?" "Our shields never detected incoming fire." The Defiance continued its impossible dance around the much larger ship, striking at critical systems with surgical precision. Where other species would try to overpower the dreadnought with brute force, the humans were taking it apart piece by piece. "Return fire. All weapons," Dexmar ordered. But the crushing Victory was designed to fight other capital ships at long range, not to swat a single small target darting around its hull. Its massive weapons couldn't track fast enough, and its point defense systems had been overwhelmed by Darwin's electronic warfare. The end came suddenly. The Defiance fired a single shot that penetrated the Dreadnought's main reactor chamber. The explosion lit up space like a new star, and when the light faded, 3 kilometers of Imperial warship had been reduced to expanding debris. On the Divine Retribution, the command deck fell silent as they watched the destruction of the crushing victory. War Admiral Zethkar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. How? He whispered. How did one small ship destroy a dreadnought? Sir, Scanner Prime Kethver reported with a trembling voice. The human vessel is broadcasting on all frequencies. Put it through. The main screen filled with the image of a human female. She appeared calm, almost relaxed, as if she had just completed a routine training exercise instead of destroying one of the most powerful ships in the Imperial fleet. I am Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earthship Defiance, she said. You came to our home expecting to find easy prey. Instead, you found predators. I suggest you reconsider your plans. Zethkar found his voice. You destroyed 1 ship, human. We have 200,000 more. Yes, Sarah replied with a smile that made the War Admiral's scales crawl. This should be fun. The transmission ended, leaving Zethkar staring at the space where the Defiance had been. But the human ship was gone, vanished into the darkness between the stars, as if it had never existed at all, for the first time in his long career. War Admiral Zethkar felt something he had never experienced before in battle: uncertainty. The humans weren't fighting like any species he had conquered. They weren't following any tactical doctrine, he understood. Alert all ships, he ordered. Combat readiness level 1. And find me that ship. But the Defiance was already gone, preparing for the next phase of a battle that would determine whether humanity lived or died. The Imperial Sovereignty Fleet spread across space in perfect formation. 200,000 ships arranged in geometric precision that had intimidated countless species into surrender. War Admiral Zethkar stood on his command deck, studying tactical displays that showed nothing. Report, he demanded. Sir, we've lost contact with 17 patrol vessels in the last hour, Commander Vexton replied. Each ship simply went silent without sending a distress signal. 17 ships don't just disappear, Zethkar growled. Find me that human vessel. But finding the Defiance was like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. The ship appeared on sensors for moments at a time, struck at isolated targets, then vanished again into the void. Each attack was surgical, precise, aimed at command vessels and communications hubs. Sir, Scanner Prime Kethver called out urgently. I'm detecting massive energy discharges from Grid Section 7 Alpha. It appears 2 of our heavy cruisers are firing on each other. Zethkar spun toward the tactical display. Sure enough, ships from the 43rd Battle Group were exchanging fire with vessels from the 51st Assault Wing. Get me both group commanders immediately. The split screen showed 2 Imperial officers, both looking confused and angry. Admiral Kothvin, why are your ships attacking Admiral Sheetadar's formation? Zethkar demanded. War Admiral, Admiral Shandar's vessels opened fire on us without warning. We're responding to hostile action. Liar! Admiral Sheetadar snarled. Your ships attacked my flagship while we were investigating the missing patrol vessels. Both officers seemed genuinely convinced they were telling the truth. Zethkar felt a chill run down his spine. Cease fire immediately. Both of you. But the damage was done. 8 ships had been destroyed in the confused battle, and trust between the fleet units was beginning to crack. War Admiral, Vexton said quietly, I'm receiving reports of communication malfunctions throughout the fleet. Orders are being received that no one remembers sending. That was when the broadcast began. Every screen in the Imperial fleet suddenly filled with the image of the human captain. But she wasn't speaking in the rough common tongue most humans used. Instead, she spoke in perfect Imperial standard, her accent matching that of the royal court on the homeworld. "Greetings, warriors of the Imperial sovereignty," Captain Chun said. "I am fascinated by your tactical formations. Tell me, War Admiral Zethkar, did you learn these maneuvers from the Battle of Kethmorin, where your predecessor lost half the Third Fleet to the Vexhai resistance? Or perhaps from the Siege of Morthon, where Admiral Thakvar's overconfidence led to the destruction of 3 dreadnoughts?" Zethkar stared at the screen in shock. Those were classified military records, known only to the highest levels of Imperial command. How could a human know such details? "I've been studying your people for quite some time," Chun continued conversationally. "Your military history is quite instructive. Take your current formation, for example. Very impressive for intimidating primitive species, but tactically unsound against a mobile opponent. Your ships are too close together for effective maneuvering. Your command structure is too rigid to adapt to changing conditions. And your communications network has more security holes than a piece of rotted cloth." As if to prove her point, chaos erupted throughout the Imperial fleet. Ships began receiving contradictory orders in the voices of their own officers. Formation leaders found themselves commanding vessels that weren't responding. The perfect geometric arrangement that had been the fleet's strength suddenly became a trap. "Darwin," Captain Chun's voice could be heard saying to someone off-screen, "initiate Communication Protocol 7. Suddenly, every Imperial officer in the fleet could hear conversations between their colleagues. Private communications meant for command staff only were being broadcast openly. Secret orders, personal disagreements between admirals, complaints about the War Admiral's leadership. Everything was being aired for all to hear. How is this possible? Zethkar demanded of his communications officer. "Sir, someone has complete access to our entire network. They're not just intercepting our signals, they're controlling them." That someone was Darwin, who had spent 3 years studying every piece of Imperial technology humans had ever encountered. The AI had identified the fatal flaw in Imperial military doctrine, their absolute reliance on centralized communication networks. Every ship was connected to every other ship, creating a web of information that could be turned against them. "Admiral Cothvin," King Zethkar's voice over the general fleet frequency. "You are relieved of command for cowardice in the face of the enemy." But Zethkar hadn't given that order. He watched in horror as Admiral Cothvin's face appeared on screen, furious and humiliated. "War Admiral, I demand an explanation. My battle group has served with honor for 20 years. I didn't send that order." Zethkar protested, but his words were lost in the chaos of similar false commands spreading throughout the fleet. On the bridge of the Defiance, Sarah Chun watched the Imperial formation slowly tear itself apart. Darwin had turned their own communication system into a weapon more devastating than any plasma cannon. "Psychological pressure is increasing exponentially," Darwin reported. "Imperial doctrine relies heavily on rigid command hierarchy. By undermining trust in their chain of command, we are creating paralysis throughout their force structure." "What about their weapons?" Sarah asked. "Observe." The Defiance suddenly appeared in the middle of the Imperial formation, seeming to materialize out of empty space. But instead of being surrounded and destroyed, something incredible happened. Half the Imperial ships began targeting the other half, each group thinking the other was protecting the human vessel. Darwin had done something no military strategist had ever attempted: turned an enemy's greatest strength into their weakness. The Imperial fleet's size and coordination, which should have guaranteed victory, was being used against them. "This is impossible," War Admiral Zethkar whispered as he watched his fleet destroy itself. "No single ship could coordinate such an attack." "You're thinking like someone who fights wars," Captain Chun's voice said over his personal communication channel. "We fight battles. Every engagement is unique. Every moment requires adaptation. Your doctrine teaches you to overwhelm opponents with superior numbers and firepower. Ours teaches us to think. The Defiance danced through the chaos it had created, its weapons striking at key targets while avoiding the friendly fire incidents that were destroying Imperial ships faster than any human attack could. But the ship's real weapon wasn't its phase-penetrating rounds or its impossible maneuverability. It was something the Imperial sovereignty had never faced before, an enemy that understood them better than they understood themselves. Darwin. Status report, Sarah requested. Imperial fleet effectiveness has decreased by 67%. Approximately 12,000 vessels have been destroyed or disabled, mostly by friendly fire incidents. Remaining ships are operating in isolated groups without effective coordination. Morale appears to be collapsing rapidly. Sarah nodded. The plan was working even better than they had hoped. But she knew this was just the beginning. The real test would come when the Imperial forces realized what was happening and tried to adapt. Broadcast final warning, she ordered. Once again, Captain Chun's face appeared on every screen in the Imperial fleet. But this time, her expression was serious, almost sad. War Admiral Zethkar, you came to our system with overwhelming force, expecting easy victory. But you made a fundamental error. You assumed that because humans are young and small, we must be weak. You never considered that youth might mean adaptability, that size might be less important than intelligence. She paused, letting her words sink in. I offer you one chance to save what remains of your fleet. Withdraw from human space immediately. Take your surviving ships and never return. If you refuse, we will finish what you started. The transmission ended, leaving the Imperial fleet in stunned silence. Of the 200,000 ships that had arrived at Seoul, barely half remained combat effective. The rest were destroyed, disabled, or so disorganized they posed no threat. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, a single human ship waited for the answer that would determine the fate of both species. War Admiral Zethkar stood alone on the command deck of the Divine Retribution, surrounded by the wreckage of his dreams. Through the viewing ports, space was filled with the debris of Imperial ships, twisted metal and frozen atmosphere, marking the graves of 100,000 warriors. The tactical displays told a story that would haunt him forever. Of the 200,000 vessels that had entered the Sol system, fewer than 80,000 remained capable of warp travel. The rest were destroyed, disabled, or drifting helplessly through space. The greatest military force in galactic history had been broken by a single ship. War Admiral, Commander Vexton approached carefully. The surviving group commanders are requesting orders. Zethkar looked at his aide, seeing the fear and confusion in the younger officer's eyes. The unthinkable had happened. The Imperial sovereignty, conqueror of 40,000 star systems, had been defeated by a species they had dismissed as primitive. Signal general retreat, Zethkar said quietly. Sir? You heard me. All ships are to withdraw from this system immediately. Set course for Imperial space. But War Admiral, the humans offered surrender terms. Perhaps we should. There will be no negotiation. Zethkar roared, his frustration finally breaking through his military discipline. Look around you. Look at what one ship did to the greatest fleet in the galaxy. Do you want to see what their entire military can do when it arrives? As the surviving Imperial ships began their retreat, the Defiance appeared one final time. It materialized directly in front of the Divine Retribution, close enough that Zethkar could see its strange, flowing hull configuration through his ship's sensors. Captain Chen's face appeared on the main screen for the last time. War Admiral, she said formally, your withdrawal is noted and appreciated. However, before you leave, I have a message for the Imperial sovereignty. Zethkar said nothing, but his recording systems captured every word. For centuries, your empire has grown by conquering species that fought conventionally. You succeeded because you were bigger, stronger, more numerous. But size isn't everything, and strength has many forms. Chun paused, and Zethkar could see something in her eyes that chilled him. Not hatred or cruelty, but a kind of cold certainty that was somehow worse. Humanity offers the sovereignty a choice. Leave us alone, and we will leave you alone. Your empire can continue to exist in peace. But if you return to human space, if you threaten our people or our allies, you will discover that what happened here today was just a demonstration. One ship, Zethkar found himself saying. You had one ship. Today we had one ship, Chun agreed. But Darwin has been busy these past few hours. Every tactical innovation we used, every system adaptation, every strategic insight has been transmitted to every vessel in the human fleet. In 6 months, we will have 1,000 ships with these capabilities. In 2 years, 10,000. She smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Zethkar had ever seen. We are a young species, War Admiral. We are a young species, War Admiral. We learn quickly, we adapt faster, and we never forget our lessons. The galaxy has spent centuries learning how to conquer. Humanity has spent its entire existence learning how to survive. The transmission ended, and the Defiance vanished into hyperspace, leaving the battered Imperial fleet to limp home with news that would shake their empire to its foundations. 3 days later, Captain Sarah Chun stood in Admiral Harrison's office on Luna Station, watching Earth spin slowly in the viewport behind his desk. The planet looked peaceful, unchanged by the battle that had determined its fate. The refugee convoys are all returning, Harrison reported. Every human colony is safe. The Sovereignty fleet jumped to hyperspace 18 hours ago and hasn't been detected anywhere in human space since. What about the rest of the galaxy? Sarah asked. Harrison smiled for the first time in weeks. That's where it gets interesting. News of the battle has spread faster than we thought possible. It seems the Imperial sovereignty had a lot of enemies who were just waiting for someone to prove they could be beaten. He activated a holographic display showing the local galactic region. Red zones marked Imperial territory, but many of them were now flashing with symbols indicating rebellion or open war. The Kalari uprising started 6 hours after our first broadcast reached their homeworld. The Martian resistance has declared independence and is demanding the withdrawal of all Imperial forces. Even some of the Sovereignty's own member species are reconsidering their loyalty. Sarah studied the display with wonder. All because of one battle? Not just the battle, Harrison corrected. Because of what the battle proved. For the first time in centuries, someone stood up to the Imperial sovereignty and won. You didn't just save Earth, Captain. You gave hope to every oppressed species in the galaxy. Darwin's voice came from the communication system. If I may add, Admiral, the tactical data from our engagement has been studied by resistance groups across known space. They are already adapting our strategies for use with their own vessels and capabilities. Speaking of which, Harrison said, turning back to Sarah, the Admiralty has some decisions to make. The Defiance project is no longer classified as experimental. We want to build an entire fleet of ships using Darwin's innovations. Sarah raised an eyebrow. And who would command such a fleet? I can't think of anyone better qualified than the woman who just defeated the largest armada in galactic history. Admiral Chun has a nice ring to it, don't you think? Before Sarah could respond, alerts began sounding throughout Luna Station. Harrison quickly activated his command display, showing sensor readings from the outer system. What is it? Sarah asked. Ships dropping out of hyperspace. Lots of them. Harrison's expression grew concerned. But they're not Imperial signatures. The tactical display filled with vessel indicators representing dozens of different species and ship designs. As they watched, message requests began flooding in from the incoming fleet. Admiral Harrison, came a transmission from the lead ship. This is Captain Veltar of the Kalari Liberation Fleet. We come seeking alliance with humanity against the Imperial sovereignty. More messages followed. The Martian Free Navy. The Vex High Resistance. Independent systems that had never had the courage to oppose the sovereignty alone, but now saw hope in unity. Harrison looked at Sarah with amazement. They're not just inspired by what you did. They want to join us. Sarah walked to the viewport and looked out at Earth, thinking about everything that had changed in just 3 days. Humanity had gone from being an unknown species, facing extinction, to the leader of what looked like a galactic revolution. Darwin, she said finally, what do you think? Are we ready for this? I believe readiness is a luxury we cannot afford. The AI replied. The Imperial sovereignty will not accept this defeat quietly. They will return, probably with allies of their own and in greater numbers. But they will still be fighting the last war while we prepare for the next one. They will expect us to have become like them. Bigger fleets, larger ships, more conventional tactics. Instead, we will give them something they have never faced. An alliance built on cooperation rather than conquest. Innovation rather than intimidation. Sarah smiled as she watched the ships of a dozen species forming protective formations around Earth. The Imperial sovereignty had come to Sol expecting to destroy humanity. Instead, they had awakened something that would change the galaxy forever. Admiral Harrison, she said, turning back to face him, I accept the promotion. And I suggest we start building those ships as fast as possible. Why the hurry? Harrison asked. Because this is just the beginning. The sovereignty won't stay beaten, and next time they'll be ready for our tricks. We need to be ready with new ones. As if summoned by her words, Darwin's voice filled the office with quiet confidence. I have been running simulations. Admiral Chun, the Imperial sovereignty possesses approximately 40,000 star systems and can field fleets numbering in the millions. However, they have never faced an opponent that grows stronger through diversity rather than uniformity. Meaning every species that joins our alliance brings new perspectives, new technologies, new ways of thinking about warfare. The sovereignty sees this diversity as weakness. I calculate it will become our greatest strength. Sarah looked out at the growing fleet surrounding Earth and felt something she hadn't experienced since this all began. Hope. The Imperial sovereignty had taught the galaxy to fear overwhelming force. Now humanity would teach it something new. Sometimes the smallest stones could start the largest avalanches, and the avalanche was just beginning.